Have we been convinced so far how reliable this Old Testament is? Well, you compare it to other books, and it's head and shoulders above that, but is it still 100% reliable? Scholars still try to insert their own point of view without evidence. So we're looking at documentary confirmation of the Old Testament accounts relative to corroborating its historicity, ergo its reliability. If it's historically inaccurate, then what else is inaccurate would be the question. And that high goal has to be because the things that the Bible teaches are not provable in this life. So everything else, if it's in question, then these things about eternal life and who God is, Jesus Christ, and the propitiatory sacrifice for sins, which speaks from Old to New Testaments, that's in question. Well, let's take a look at where we are now, looking at the patriarchs. Did they actually exist, or are they figments of the imagination of these wonderful writers? Of course, you have 40-some-odd authors throughout the Old Testament, wholly consistent. They didn't talk to one another. They weren't even living in the same time, at the same time as most of them, and didn't know each other's works. And yet they're so wholly consistent, something behind that. A supernatural God had to be there because the record is perfect. No contradictions and no errors. While the narratives of the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob do not present the same kinds of difficulties as do the early chapters of Genesis, they were long considered legendary because they did not seem to fit with the known evidence of that period. As more has become known, though, these stories are increasingly verified. Legal codes from the time of Abraham show why the patriarch would have been hesitant to throw Hagar out of his camp, for he was legally bound to support her. Only when a higher law came from God was Abraham willing to put her out. Marriage tablets. People love for you to hear their music. Just put earphones on, sir. Marriage tablets from the Euphrates mentions King Arioch, or Arioch of Genesis 14, and lists the towns of Nahor and Haran from Genesis 24:10, as well as the names of Benjamin and Haberu. The married letters reveal some names besides the Mablet tablets. The married letters reveal some such names as Abraham, Jacob, El, and Benjamites, though these do not refer to the biblical people, for at least show that the names were in use. And these letters also support the record of a war in Genesis 14, where 5 kings fought against 4 kings. The names of these kings seem to fit with the prominent nations of the day. For example, Genesis 14:1 mentions an Amorite king, Arioch. The married documents render the king's name Ariwook. Everybody likes to be loud. All of this evidence leads to the conclusion that the source materials of Genesis were first-hand accounts of someone who lived during Abraham's time. In another study done by Kitchen, he gives examples of archaeological factors for dating for the patriarchs during the Middle Bronze Age. The biblical data match objective facts from the ancient world in an almost uncanny way, establishing the general reliability of the biblical periods. One important item involves the price of slaves in silver shekels. From ancient Near Eastern sources, we know the price of slaves in some detail for a period lasting about 2,000 years, from 2400 BC to 400 BC. These data provide a solid body of evidence that we can compare with the figures in the Bible, in which the price of slaves is mentioned on several occasions. We have these 4 passages. In each case, the biblical narrative slave price fits the general period to which it relates. Now, however, there is quietly mounting evidence that the basic inherited outline from the patriarchs to the Exodus to the Israelites' entry into Canaan, the united monarchy, and then the divided kingdoms of Israel and Judah, and the exile and return, is essentially sound. Now we have 6, Genealogy of Abraham. We find that the genealogy of Abraham is definitely historical. However, there seems to be some question as to whether or not these names represent individuals of ancient cities, although ancient cities often often took the name of the founding fathers. The one thing that is certain about Abraham is that he was an individual and that he did exist. As we hear from Burroughs, everything indicates that here we have an historical individual. As noted above, he is not mentioned in any known archaeological source, but his name appears in Babylonia as a personal name in the very period to which he belongs. Earlier attempts had been made to move the date of Abraham to the 15th or 14th century BC, a time much too late for him. However, Albright points out that because of the data mentioned above and other evidence, we have a great deal of evidence from personal and place names, almost all of which is against such unwarranted telescoping of traditional data. Genealogy of Esau. In the genealogy of Esau, there is mention made of the Horites. It was at one time accepted that these people were cave dwellers because of the similarity between Horite and the Hebrew word for cave. That's the idea that they lived in caves. Now, however, findings have shown that they were a prominent group of warriors living in the Near East in patriarchal times. We have Isaac, the oral blessing episode in Genesis 27. It would seem indicates Joseph Free, a most unusual event, that Isaac did not take his oral blessing back when he discovered Jacob's deception. However, the Nuzi tablets tells us that an oral declaration was perfectly legal and binding. One tablet records a lawsuit involving a woman who was to wed a man, but his jealous brothers contested it. The man won the suit because his father had orally promised the woman to him. Oral statements carried a very different weight than they do today. The Nuzi text came from a similar culture to that which is in Genesis. Nuzi tablets from Iraq speak about a number of customs which we find in the Pentateuch, such as a barren wife giving a handmaiden to her husband, like in Hagar, a bride chosen for the son by the father, Rebekah, a dowry paid to the father-in-law, as in Jacob, work done to pay a dowry, like in Jacob, the unchanging oral will of a father, Isaiah, a father giving his daughter a slave girl, Leah or Rachel, and the sentence of death for stealing a cult god, like Jacob. Ernest Wright explains this serious action. Oral blessings or deathbed wills were recognized as valid at Nuzi as well as in patriarchal society. Such blessings were serious matters and were irrevocable. We recall that Isaac was prepared to give his word even though his blessing had been extorted by Jacob under false pretenses. And Isaac trembled with a very great trembling and said, "Whoever it was that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate, even he shall be blessed." In commenting further on the above Nuzi record, Cyrus Gordon draws 3 points. This text conforms to the biblical blessings like those of the patriarchs, in that it is A, an oral will, B, with legal validity, and C, made to a son by a dying father. Thus, a clearer light is shown on a culture that we know inadequately at best. And all these writers who had no evidence of this and then wrote about things that they had no evidence for as if they were knowledgeable about anything at all. So much for a lot of ancient history. Jacob, the purchase of Esau's birthright. Gordon provides information on this episode in Genesis 25. Few incidents in family life seem more peculiar to us than Esau's sale of his birthright to his twin brother Jacob. It has been pointed out that one of the Nuzi tablets portrays a similar event. The tablet to which Gordon refers is explained by Wright. Esau's sale of his birthright to Jacob is also paralleled in the Nuzi tablets, where one brother sells a grove, which he has inherited, for 3 sheep. This would have been quite as uneven a bargain as that of Esau. Esau said to Jacob, "Give me, I pray, some of that red pottage to eat." And Jacob said, "Sell me first thy or your birthright." And Esau said, "Behold, I am about to die of hunger. What is a birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me first." And he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and a mess of lentils, and he ate and drank. Free explains further, in one Nuzi tablet, there is a record of a man named Tukitila who transferred his inheritance rights concerning a grove to his brother Jertzpasah in exchange for 3 sheep. Esau used a similar technique in exchanging his inheritance rights to obtain the desired pottage. So, S.H. Horn says, Esau sold his rights for food in the pot, while Tukitila sold his food for food still on the roof. Cyrus Gordon claims, in B, the Jacob and Laban episode, Cyrus Gordon claims that we can understand even Genesis 29 by episodes in the Nuzi tablets. Laban agrees to give a daughter in marriage to Jacob when he makes him a member of the household. It is better that I give her to thee than I give her to another man. Dwell with me. Our thesis that Jacob's joining Laban's household and approximates Willah's personal mention in the tablets adoption is borne out by other remarkable resemblances with the Nuzi document. Well, the stolen images episode in C in Genesis 31. This event has been explained by other Nuzi discoverers. The following from J.P. Free's Archaeology in the Bible gives a good explanation not only of the episode, but also the background on the Nuzi tablets themselves. Over 1,000 clay tablets were found in 1925 in the excavation of a Mesopotamian site known today as Yorgan Tepe. Subsequent work brought forth another 3,000 tablets and revealed the ancient site as Nuzi. The tablets written about 1500 BC illuminate the background of the biblical patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. One instance will be cited. When Jacob and Rachel left the house of Laban, Rachel stole Laban's family images or terrapin. When Laban discovered the theft, he pursued his daughter and son-in-law, and after a long journey overtook them. Commentators have long wondered why he should go to such pains to recover the images he could have replaced easily in the local shop. The Nuzi tablets record one instance of a son-in-law who possessed the family images having the right to lay legal claim to his father-in-law's property, a fact which explains Laban's anxiety. This and other evidence from the Nuzi tablets fits the background of the patriarchal accounts into the early period when the patriarchs lived, and does not support the Syriacal view, which holds that the accounts were written 100 years after their time. Thanks to archaeology, we're beginning to understand the actual setting of much of the Bible. Of course, if you don't have anything to write, then you write fiction. And that's what happens in a lot of these periods of time because people would have an interest in it. Wanted to go to Twitter or something like that and make your own ideas up. That's what they do today, but that's the nature of man, even today. Number 10, Joseph. The fiction or fact? Selling it to slavery. K.A. Kitchen brings out in his book Ancient Orient and Old Testament that Genesis 37:28 gives the correct price for a slave in the 18th century B.C. The price of 20 shekels of silver paid for Joseph in Genesis 37:28 is the correct average price for a slave in about the 18th century B.C. Earlier than this, slaves were cheaper, averaged 10 to 15 shekels, and later they became steadily dearer. This is one more little detail true to its period in cultural history. And Joseph's visit to Egypt. The possibility of Joseph's visit to Egypt has been questioned by some. Millar Boros points out, accounts of going down to Egypt in times of famine bring to mind Egyptian references to Asiatics who came to Egypt for this purpose. A picture of visiting Semites may be seen on the wall of a tomb at Beni Hassan, which comes from a time not far from that of Abraham. Howard Voss, Genesis and Archaeology, also points out the presence of the Hyksos in Egypt. But we have much more than pictorial representation of Kumnatep's tomb to support the early entrance of foreigners into Egypt. There are many indications that the Hyksos tribe began to infiltrate the Nile Valley around 1900 BC. Other contingents came about 1730 and overwhelmed the native Egyptian rulers. So if we take an early date from the entrance of the Hebrews into Egypt, they would have come in during the period of Hyksos infiltration when many foreigners were apparently entering. If we accept the date of about 1700 or 1650 BC, for the entrance of the Hebrews, the Hyksos would have been ruling Egypt and likely would have received other foreigners. So Voss goes on to draw 4 connections. More on this later.